Order, do we need to review Zoom procedures?
No, we don't need to do Zoom procedures. Just a reminder that for tonight, this is primarily a public or a discussion between the council on the input we received last week. So that's the primary focus of this. So general business is going to be after, but we'll talk about that after we approve the agenda, because the primary focus is for the commissioners to go through and have the conversation of what input we've already received.
Yes, right. Okay, would anyone like to move to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
And I second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Okay, I don't have any
So-
comments. Like Mike said, yeah, I feel like we have a lot of work to do this meeting because it was a lot of public comment that we got, which was exciting, but hopefully we can get through it all and make any needed changes. And Mike was just reminding me that we can, you know, of item number 4, we can do C and D on April 14th, once we've had a chance to look at all the changes made, and then we can approve the document with any changes we might make tonight, which makes sense to me. So we do have that space, but we also have a lot to consider. So let's move on to item number 4. And I guess we could just go through use the matrix to,
All commissioners must be visible on the screen at all times. So I guess we'll need to, I don't know, Sean and Maria, I don't know if you guys can have your videos up and just announce that you're online.
Hi, this is Maria. I'm here.
Yep. Sean. Also here.
All right, so we will, unless the planning commission has other ways of wanting to go through all this, usually we just start marching our way through. The matrix that we have starts at about number 180 and runs through, well, it runs out of numbers, so it keeps going. So I will start just at the top and we'll just go through them in the order that we received them. So this was our breakdown of the comments that were received. The first 2 came during the public input session. That was before. One was about the public bathroom information being incorrect, and one about the Berry Street Recreation Center accessibility. So the first one, the date in that one says 2023, so it was accurate as of that time. So today, dispatch directs people to the portalet on the other side of the lot. Likely, if the portalet goes away, the police station will reopen. We could update or keep that more general. That was about the community services and the availability of bathrooms. I can make either change if people have a preference.
yeah, I guess, shoot, I don't know, can we have the plan up, or do we have to have the video? I don't know how that,
I can pull up. That was community services. You can take your conversations outside.
You had honored my records request, I wouldn't be seeing this for the first time right now.
And that was received today, so. Homelessness, that was under. Homelessness.
okay, I mean, we don't, maybe this is.
I'm just trying to get to
Yeah.
share. I've got people who are,
Oh,
there we go.
Okay. Just in general, it'd be helpful to.
yeah. So I've got, oh, Now I just lost it on my screen. It's on your screen, not on my screen. Where did it go? Just for a second. There we go. All right. So I believe it was on the one on the right, as of 2023, second one down.
Oh, okay.
So it said as of 2023, the city and city hall, the police department, 24 hours, transit center, pavilion building, and others are available for the public. These should be mapped and signed and made available. So the comment was that the police department is no longer 24 hours because there is a portalet outside. So, and oh, I'm gonna have to lock this up here. Hold on.
Oh my God.
Well, I am
Oh.
just having issues
We
getting.
are the Ku Klux Klan. We hate murderers. We hate Jews. We hate faggots. And we hate spits. We don't have to have a reason to hate them just because they breathe. We hate the filthy dogs. You people need to get off your ass and
Anyone have a, I mean, I don't, this first item about, public bathroom information, I don't have a strong feeling about. Does anyone think we need to make a change or?
I'm just looking at this, why are there two, there's like continue the public restroom project. I know this is not the comment, but continue and improve the public restroom program. Are those two different things? Am I looking at a old version or something?
To jump back to get my pieces back again. So yeah, improved public restroom, continue the public restroom project. Oh, the first one's project, second one's program.
So they're different?
They're different.
Okay, so the project is like that we're gonna figure this out.
The project is about us building facilities,
Building facilities,
and the other one is about
making them available.
making things available.
Okay, and so the comment was about that second one. And can we just delete that as of 2023? I mean, can we just delete after that?
You mean delete that one sentence that's there, or the last two
I
sentences?
mean, it's not correct anymore, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, if we just
Yeah,
delete
we
it,
can just delete the
we,
last
we
two
can acknowledge
sentences.
that it's important that they have, that there are some open, right? We need to figure it out.
All right.
Is that okay?
Yep. I'm
Sounds good to me.
good.
Okay, so then
So delete last two sentences. So the next one was about the rec facility and the ADA. We had received a comment and we thought it was referenced, but actually the commenter was correct. It's not specifically mentioned on the facility strategy for improving the Berry Street Recreation Facility. And it could also be added to the CIP in those two chapters. So that was my recommendation, was just to add it into those different places.
I agree.
that sounds good.
Yeah.
I have a suspicion these are fake people. So
I guess as long as they can't take our meeting.
yeah,
Oh, hey, Sean.
I'm gonna take
You
it
just
to
came in.
just
That's
old
the solution.
school. Yeah, we got
Sorry.
Kid handoff, but
Yeah,
it seems like
that was a little crazy. Sorry.
safer.
Yeah.
maybe. So so I'll make those changes to the various spots that I pointed out in there. Berry Street Rec Facility, CIP, in those two chapters. It appears as a goal, but it doesn't appear as a strategy. Is that fine?
That last part, there's a
Oh.
goal, not as a strategy.
We had it as a goal. There was a recommendation when we were doing the plan to change and make the ADA transition plan a priority as we're doing upgrades. And so we put it in as a goal. And then Carolyn came back and pointed out that it was not in for, in particular, she was pointing out for the Berry Street Recreation Facility, which is in the Utilities and Facilities chapter in the CIP and in the and in the Community Services chapter. So there are a couple of places where the CIP and we could have that recognized.
Yeah, I agree.
So heading down to what was public hearing comments. So we had a bunch that were written, typed, sent to us, and we've also had a number that were came at the public hearing. So this list can address anything from any section. A bunch of the ones I put in green are ones, unless people see that they think need to be talked about, I don't think need to be discussed. We agree with them. Going to make the changes. I'll note a few of them as we go through them. One comment was the ability to print maps from the storyboards. It's not required. And we've also looked at the possibility of doing that other than screenshots. That's the best way of being able to print those maps. So my recommendation is not to make any changes. It's not actually functionally possible, and it's not a requirement under law.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think if you look into it and that's the case, then yeah.
Comments have been made about the table of contents and a cover page for the archive version. We have gone through and we will be going through. That's the last thing we do because we have to make all the changes before we can make all the PDFs, before we can make all the things. So the last thing that will go up will be the archive version that collects all those. On the next page 208, a desire to put a table of contents on the welcome page. The staff disagrees with this recommendation. It's a very tight website. There are only 3 tabs, and most of the content is on the second tab, which itself is basically a table of contents. We do have the video up now, which will help people to navigate. We're going to clean that video up before the 14th because as we change the images, it's going to change the content. So we'll just make a few adjustments to that.
Sorry, going back to the table of contents, this isn't specific to that comment, but if kind of that tab is to serve as sort of the table of contents, I think it would be nice to have it reordered in the order that the actual city plan is going to be in, instead of having land use show as the first icon, but really it's several chapters in. So
The archive version matches what's there. Yeah, we could do. Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can do them, or we can just rearrange the archive to match what's.
Yeah, either way, just kind of having the website match what the PDF printout is, I think will make it easier for people not to have to chase where the sections are.
I think Maria has her hand up.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead,
I see
Maria.
that. Okay. Let's hope it's really her.
I was just making the point with this and I think other similar comments that while these might be nice to haves, I see a lot of staff effort then going into maintaining table of contents and kind of complicating the planning department's workflow. So I think there is like a balance to be struck between what commenters may want, what may actually be necessary, and then what may just create undue work for the planning staff. So I agree that we don't need to plan table of contents.
Yeah, I agree with that. I
On
think
the
it's a
website.
really good point, Maria.
All right, so that was that one. Add the citations, change URL to have the city of Montpelier rather than SE group. So we did check on that today. We can make that change. It will require changing all of the URLs throughout. So all the matches that go in. So we will have to do that. It'll basically drop down and rename it. And then we have to go through and retest everything, because if there's any interior connections, they all may need to be checked to make sure that the connections are still there. So the answer is yes, and we're hoping it's an easy process. The colorblind viewer, we're going through and checking on that one, and the text reader we believe works. We're just gonna have to double check it when it's finally complete. We'll have to go through and check it. To that end, we also will be going through and adding text to the photos. So that's one of the other requirements that has to go in. And so we're working on that right now.
Just one little quick note there. The folks text readers should be able to work through the story maps really just fine. I do think one concern I have is in the chapter tiles. Chapter tiles have the text baked in as a part of the image of so where it says like community service, for instance, that's built into the image. So if someone's searching
So
for
the
community services,
headline, the header, you mean?
it's sort of like this is all baked into the image, that text.
Okay.
So it's not readable by a text reader. It's also not searchable by like a control F. So if the title could be separated as text, that would be my only note about readability by a text reader.
Yeah, we've tried to go through and catch those.
Yeah.
So you're saying the tiles
Yeah,
are
the chapter
probably
tiles on the chapter page. And it could be redundant. You could keep it in there and just below it say community services.
yeah, we can insert the same thing we were doing with pictures, is
Yeah.
putting in picture of bridge with flowers.
Yeah, so I wouldn't recommend spending time updating those images, but just make sure it's community services in actual text. below it.
Okay, so below it, if it has that, and then below it, it has community services,
Yeah.
PDF, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, because whatever text reader someone has on their computer will then be able to read that text, but not from the image.
Got it. So the next chunk we can get through probably pretty quickly with these came from Kate Stevenson from the Energy Committee. I think they were all very good. Including 218 where it's not green. Actually, I can get that information from Chris as to what is the specific the recommendation that was in there said we were going to a chip system for the rec facility, and it's not. The DOE grant is for a different system. So but we'll get that. It's a hybrid system. So and so all these other ones are mostly technical. 19, 20, 21 are all technical corrections. 22 is the Historical Society. This is going to take probably a second or two or get a little bit of input. Their recommendation, they wanted to have a strategy of developing a plan to improve the views from Hubbard Park Tower. And originally I was like, oh, this sounds like a great idea. The issue, this is coming out of the Montpelier Historical Society, and they've already approached the Parks Commission and they aren't interested in doing that. And a lot of the trees are in the Capitol complex. So there's a lot of challenges there, as much as it kind of sounds like a cool project. They want it as a high priority. I think if it's in, it would be a lower priority. And Maria has some thoughts. Go ahead, Maria. Oh, you have to stop muting yourself.
Should I do that instead of just okay? Well, my comments here were a bit. Well, one, I mean, to me, in like the age of climate change, the idea of taking down a stream of trees to recreate a view of downtown Montpelier is maybe misguided. It might send the wrong message, I think, that of what we value. And then my second fear was that if we make this a priority, like a stated priority in the city plan, that it may impede future construction if a sight line is blocked by the construction of a building. So, I mean, I am very tentative on whether this is even a good idea. But I'm curious to hear what other people think.
I don't support it.
I don't like it at all.
Yeah.
The idea of a historic view shed is not appealing to me. It sounds like, for the reason Maria stated, that it's another, lever to pull. If somebody wants to build something that interferes with the historic view shed, that just another way for somebody to torpedo a project.
I don't really have a very strong opinion either way, personally, but I would defer to especially the Parks Department. If this is in the park and they've already discussed it and they are not in favor, that I would defer to that choice.
Yeah, I mean, I also wasn't loving this suggestion either. I didn't even think of the reasons that were discussed about how it could potentially be used as a way to maybe be a hurdle for developments that ruin a view shed. But yeah, I don't know. I think I agree with Tim the most, where it's not something that I think is feasible to go through this whole process. And based on the view shed of like this period of time, well, yes, it was historical for that moment of time, and now in this moment in time, this is the historical view shed that we're living in right now. So I kind of don't see the need to get the view shed back to this one particular moment in time.
Okay, I'll go the consensus no on that one. The next set of comments, we've got scrap the online version and create a physical plan with downloadable version online. That's a policy. I mean, I think these are
Scrap the online version and create a physical plan with downloadable version online.
basically go to the archive version as the version and
Yeah.
scrap the online version.
I oppose that. I think that having a downloadable PDF along with the current online version is more than sufficient.
All right, so
I don't think we're gonna.
okay. Let's see, consensus on that. So URL is different. That's actually technical. They have to be different. That's how websites work. URL from link in the story map needs to be the same link as the story chapters. That's actually a good catch, and we're going to go through and make sure that is correct. So what 228 was basically looking at was that if you were on the chapters page and you click on the link to the implementation plan, it has a link address. And if you go to the storyboard and click on the link address, it says, the shortcut that's within the storyboard to get to the implementation, it's a different URL, and they should be the same, and they're not. So we're going to make those the same. At this point, they were both going to the same document, but you shouldn't have the same, you should go to the same URL, because otherwise you've got the same document twice, as opposed to one document being referenced twice. So if you change one, you might forget to change the other. So that's a good one to update, and we will work on. That's why it's orange. Downloadable PDF not readable, that's being corrected in the next version. We actually already have most of that complete, but that'll again come down to the last thing we do is create the archive PDF.
Does that mean readable by a text, like a screen
Readable,
reader?
yeah, for whatever reason, when you download from the storyboard, it downloads to a PDF, but it takes it as an image.
Yeah.
And so it's no longer readable.
Right.
So Nick has a converter that's converting it from the image back to reader.
Okay.
So that way we would have readable PDFs in the final version. So that will be done. The video is now posted. Integrate the statutory requirements into the plan. We can certainly add the required report into the additional resources. This is going to come up in a lot of these suggestions coming up. My recommendation is not to integrate the statutory requirements into the document, but we'll take them one at a time and kind of go through. Aaron was going to go and work on a quick rewrite. There were comments about the landing page and the readability of the landing page. So Aaron was going to take a stab at rewriting that. So if you guys want to give authorization for Aaron to complete that rewrite, he's just going to go through and make it he's going to wordsmith it because that was one of the ones that wasn't done. So he's
I
going
think
to
that makes sense.
Yeah, that's good. And I liked Thomas's edits to like suggestions of what it could look like too. Right?
I gave those to Aaron. In addition, actually, Peter Kelman had comments on that as well. So I gave both of those comments to Aaron. He was going to try to get it done for tonight.
But he could draft it for our next meeting, right? So.
Yeah, he'll get it to me so we can get it online because it'll have to be.
Okay. Have to be online.
It'll have to be put up because we'll have to then make it into a PDF so we can have the archive. So the archive is online for the 14th.
Okay.
So, recommendation change language of regional impacts to specify regional impact was conducted. So the CVRPC has some recommendations of some minor language changes that because of how we've done this, they recommend a simple statement. A simple solution is a statement that Montpelier Planning Commission considered Berlin, Middlesex, and East Montpelier town plans, as well as the Central Vermont Regional Plan. No inconsistencies among these plans and the Montpelier plan appear to exist. And so I tried to kind of say that when I did it, but I wasn't as direct as that one is. And we have submitted this to the regional commission, and all of the neighboring towns have received copies. So we will review and add those. The copyright question is actually the copyrights we asked, and they can and should be removed. So we have removed the copyright. Suggested language at the start of the arts and culture. So this is where we start getting into the idea of restating state law in the front of each one of these chapters. There's no requirement that we have to restate state law. In this case, it's relatively short. In others, it's quite long. And if we want a document that's readable, my suggestion is we add the required report to the additional resources and not restate them, but that's a policy question for you guys to decide.
Yeah, I think it's great to have that report in the additional resources.
I'm kind of indifferent because I feel like it was already written up, so we have the language that we could put in if we wanted to, if we don't want to. I could go either way, really.
And my comment on this, my comment to the comment was that I think statutory language would hinder the public's ability to read the document. Statutory language is not easily readable. And I think it can get complicated And I think for this, this is a public facing document. So we want something that has plain language. It's easily understood by everybody. And if there's no need to put statutory language in there, I don't know why we would.
I agree with that as well. I think this should be as accessible in all sorts of that word, definitions of that word as possible. So I think I would lean towards, I think what Sean said about putting it into additional resources. Maybe that came from Mike as well. That seems reasonable to me.
All
Good
right.
to me.
So the next one, add street addresses to each of the descriptions for the attractions and arts and culture.
This doesn't seem necessary. I mean, nobody's coming to the city plan to look for locations of art, I don't think, but maybe I'm wrong. But
We are going to add a description under each image, right?
Yeah, it's pinned to a map
Hmm.
and it's
Right.
there. It just doesn't have the street address.
I agree with Ariane. I think it would add needless complexity to the document. And then it would also be something, again, for city staff to have to update and keep current, because people move, studios move around, things move. There's no need for it to me.
Okay. The next one down is again back to stating state law. So we've kind of made a decision on that one. Economic development, restate state law. Recommendation to add statistics to support the claims presented in the plan and what numbers the plan is proposing at the end of 8-year period. Where will the jobs be located and who will fill those jobs? Will we encourage local businesses to hire locally, encourage residents to shop locally? I put in as my note, I'll review, and I'm working with the RPC to go through, but we'll review any statistics requirements to make sure there isn't anything that's missing that's required. The rest of it would be policy decisions on how detailed you want to get with recommendations. But I mean, in general, we haven't had really specific discussions of which jobs, we want to increase.
I think that gets into the weeds a little too much.
The Vermont Futures Project published that report talking about the growth that we need to be sort of fiscally solvent. And I think that in some future iteration of this, we could look at that and say, well, what's Montpelier's slice of that? To say we need to create, there's 120,000 jobs or something like that that need to be created. We could look at that. I don't know that we're going to do that right now. Wasn't something we looked at. They have really good data to support it. They've been working on it a long time. So I think we could do that in the future.
And we do identify that we need to redo our economic development strategic plan. And I think that a lot of that will come out of the results of that, as if there is a specific change of direction based on the fact that the workforce and work environment has changed over the past 10 years. So, but I don't think we'll know. And I don't think we usually get into that much of a specific to go through and say, we're going to need 1,000 jobs and we're going to need 250 of them in construction and, usually it's really trying to make sure big picture, you've got the space, if we had 0 vacancies for commercial and we've got demand for commercial, then that impacts how we create our land use plan. Do we need to open additional areas up for additional development? But I don't think we're in that place, but I would suggest I'll continue to look at the statistics requirements. But I don't think the other pieces are necessary. Energy, add state law, add numbers to meet requirement. Again, this is another one. The Regional Planning Commission says they have some quick template of basically demographics And so what I might do is either remove one of the pictures or add another box that would come in, that would just go in and insert the statistics. If it looks like we need statistics, that we'll try to grab that. But we're not expecting much. Like I said, we're being extra careful on every one of these. There are hundreds and hundreds of requirements, so we're just trying to add state law. We've talked about that. Housing, add state law, expand the city plan to include additional information. We'll have a lot more on the housing later on. The RPC did review the housing and they thought the housing met the statistical requirements, but I will go through with them again. The RPC wanted to wait until after this meeting so we could go through and make the edits. So that way they're reviewing the most up-to-date version for compliance. They've already reviewed it once for compliance, but now we're going back as we get comments and people saying it doesn't meet this or it doesn't meet that, then we sit down and comb through and look at what's in other plans and what's generally there. Land use, add state law again, add text to address all the requirements that the draft plan does not address. We'll review these with state law. I was pretty confident these were meeting pretty well, meeting all the requirements. That's why we've got all those boxes in there. But we will again continue to double check on those. Resilience, add state law. Transportation, add state law. Add railroad service. We'll double check on the rail to make sure it's in conformance with the requirement, unless somebody feels strongly about having more conversation on that.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm confused for a second. You want to confirm that rails in conformance with state law, that if we add it in, it might not be.
I think the other comment was an interest in talking about the connections out to Montpelier Junction, which is not technically in Montpelier, and addressing Amtrak and those which are technically not within the city's limits.
Oh, okay.
Utilities and facilities, add state law, separate Berlin and Montpelier customers. That's not necessary. Our water and service utilities service those two communities as well, or portions of them. So, but we will see if we can label the Belco and GMP. We think that's probably easy. We'll have to just look into that. We just put the utilities up. We did not just differentiate between who owned what utility line.
Label them on the map.
On the map.
Yeah.
So the public hearing. Many comments that the housing plan was not aggressive enough, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 new housing units in 20 years. So this is a policy review and decision. And we have a bunch of other ones. I don't know if you guys want to save a couple of these for the end, but that was one. We got a lot of comment on that one.
So can we
As to what we
tackle
want to
this?
do, and then I
Yeah.
can insert it into the housing or into the land use or both.
So the Let's Build Home comments, we had a lot of comments, but it's based on Vermont Housing Finance Agency data about what we actually need. And they said they recommended 75 a year, 600 in 8 years, and 1,000 in 20. So I would say, maybe we want to go even further than that and be aspirational, but I would say that let's use that number, which is higher than where we started. I don't know if there are other thoughts on that, but
Use the 1,020 years number.
yeah, they said 600 houses in 8 years and 1,000 in 20.
I think that's really good as an aspirational baseline, and that if there's notes about being able to exceed that, then great. But yeah,
Or
baseline.
more.
Yeah. exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this says a minimum, so I feel like using that number would be good, and it's based in something, at least.
And it is aspirational. I think in an email to Mike a couple weeks ago, and I was asking about how many units have been, built in the past 3 years. And Mike, I think you gave me a figure for 2010 to 2020. It was maybe 143 units. So that's a single decade at 143 units. So if we're comparing ourselves to that and looking at 600 over the next 10 years, and then an additional 400 on top of that over the next 20 years, I think 1,000 is wonderful, and I think it's doable, and it is still highly aspirational. We would have to change a lot to get there. But I like being able to. I think using Let's Build Homes as a reference is a very good one.
So do you want that 70? They said it's 75
75 a year, yeah.
to start.
And is that kind of capturing what the sentiment was of the public comments, which is like, we need to make this as big and bold as possible, So do we want to go bigger and bolder? I don't
Well,
be tone deaf to what people were saying,
Agreed. I think the sentiments were aggressive. 1,000 as a baseline, and I heard 1,500, 2,000, and someone commented about doubling. So that would be 4,000 in the next 20 years.
I was gonna say 1,000 over 20 years.
For perspective, we have 4,000 housing units here in the city right now.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. So
a
sorry.
1,000,
The idea of-
1,000 house increase would be a 25% increase of the number of houses we have today.
Yeah, no, someone was commenting about what if we do an additional 4,000 in 20 years and double the size of the city. So there were comments about really going very far in that direction. So we would be honoring, but just honoring comments by stopping at that 1,000. That's why my comment is to say to use that as a baseline.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's hard. I mean, I'm all for going for the biggest number possible, but on the other hand, I wonder, is there tremendous value? Because as you said, it's it's very aspirational, and I support that. But I'm having trouble understanding, like, are we just, what's the value in being aggressive? Are we going to really be able to use that in a concrete way to develop housing? So, or maybe it doesn't matter. I'm just thinking out loud.
Big number to show, hey, we really mean it, or is it like, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So at a certain scale, what happens is you're going to start running into, have we planned, or if that is the goal, then we need to plan for the ability to accommodate that. So at a certain point, we'll be exceeding our ability to provide educational. So we'll have to build another school, or right now, sewer and water plants both operate about 50%. So yes, could we technically double? We probably potentially could, but I don't know if that would necessarily be we haven't evaluated the traffic impacts of doubling the number of everything's, or the impact on police and fire and the other services. But I think for the most part, looking at a scale of about 1,000, its impacts would probably be able to be absorbed within all of the things without. Now, if we're going to go bigger than that, then I think we need to also include some strategies that go through and say we need to start investigating the impacts or studying the impacts of what this new strategy would entail and how we're going to address them. Do we end up having impact fees to address additional facilities that need to go in?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll see Maria has her hand up.
Hi. Oh, so I have to leave in a little bit, but I just wanted to weigh in on this discussion. I mean, kind of piggybacking on what Ariane was saying, that I am for putting a larger number down as a goal, but I think there has to be, if we do that, I think there has to be a discussion of what we can actually do to see that number come to fruition. And I think I forget who it was, one of the people commenting last week said that scale of housing is that the city would have to approve, a construction of 40 units at a time. And so what does that look like? And I think that is maybe what Mike is also getting to, that when you are allowing or when you want construction at that scale, how are you going to go about it? What type of building are we now talking about? I don't think we're talking about 1,000 single family homes. Maybe we are. I don't know what others in the planning commission think, but to me, this is indicative of we need large scale development. And I would prefer for it to be infill, like one of the other commenters mentioned. But that means a lot of changes to the zoning as it currently is. So I think, putting a very large number in there sounds great, but I think there has to be the work on the back end to show that we actually mean it. And this is what we're willing to do to see that happen. But I do need to go. So thank you.
Thanks, Maria.
Thanks, Maria.
All of my comments are in that Google spreadsheet, as much as they're worth, but just kind of my thoughts on this whole discussion. Thank you, guys.
You.
Here's one of my thoughts on this is that with Sabins and Country Club Road, we're looking at how many units between the two of those, potentially over 500, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's gonna probably be between 500 and 1,000 units.
That like those two would get us most of the way to 1,000 unit 20-year goal. So that number is, not unreasonable. Something larger than that, it's within reach as well then. But I'm happy to use those numbers that Gabe tossed out there. Like, especially in the context of Country Club Road and Sabins, they're very reasonable as a base.
And it's not like we can't, adjust the plan if we realize we need more, right? We're just saying, look, here's some pretty prolific housing experts that recommend something that's based on data. This is what we need to do. We need to do this. We need to get there. We need to figure out how to get there. And, and if we need to change it in a few years, then we'll change it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think this is a big difference from our recent
30
history.
units a year or something.
So I think it also, people will respond to this in multiple ways. What we saw last week was, a real big push for going as big as possible. That's not going to be the thought of purview of everyone in town. So I think finding something that feels sensible, reasonable, especially with those two big projects, I think a baseline aspiration of 1,000 or more seems good.
Agreed.
Okay, so do you have,
No, that's pretty much the consensus on the 75 a year and 1,000 over 20 years, and we'll
okay,
integrate that into the housing and the land use. We'll see where they plug in appropriately into both. The next was to amend the zoning. So we already have the unified development regulations in there as a strategy in housing and land use. And we can go through and detail some of those other points that were put in there, subdivision regulations, major site plans, as discussion items that we can continue to look at.
So my recommendation on this one is that, and I know, Mike, this might sound offensive because I know we're constantly reviewing the plan, the zoning rules, but instead of saying amend and continue to administer, right? Which is like more of the same. I think giving permission was what we heard. We want to hear that. And I think, again, using the language of the let's build homes. I mean, let's dramatically amend the zoning bylaws. Let's put that in there, dramatically amend unified development regulations.
I was
That
good.
gives permission.
Yeah, oh, no, I was going to suggest amend the unified development regulations to encourage housing development. Or dramatically is fine too.
I mean, I don't know, if we're looking to give permission and we want people, that's what we always hear, these plans, and I've actually seen it. Plans are used as weapons in the DRB to tank projects, right? But if somebody can come in and use as a positive weapon and say, look, you say right here, you're trying to dramatically amend the zoning. We recommend that you interpret this particular interpretable clause this way. I mean, that also is a weapon. And I mean, it's dramatic, but I would use it. I mean, I don't know what other people think, but dramatically amend. That was what was recommended, and I agree. I think it's consistent with the feedback that we've heard.
Yeah, just as a stylistic thing, dramatically, but I'm with you in spirit. I think, yeah, I just was going to say.
Dramatically, but I think it is.
Yeah, I would just add to encourage housing development. I don't know what people think of that. And take out, like you said, continue, because I do think it gives this feeling of stasis or, yeah.
Do we want to mention, Mike, you had mentioned, do we want to mention any of the things that we'd specifically like to review, such as the height restrictions, the parking restrictions?
Subdivision.
Yeah, I had subdivision, major site plan, increase height allowance.
Six units, making it permissible for 6 units.
Yeah, I mean, that's already in place.
Right, but what was pointed out last week is that you have to go through a major site plan review.
Yeah, that's addressing the major site plan requirements. And I think there are a number of smaller changes that can have some of those impacts. I have concerns of dramatically pulling things out. There's going to be a rebound to this when
I'm just saying, if we just
goes-
put the word review these specific, we
Yeah.
had some very specific 5 or 6.
Oh
things
yeah,
that
no. I'm just saying. I mean, we already have very generous zoning rules. Anything in design review has no density. Anything. I mean, we've got some.
No, but some of the issues that were brought up, I mean.
Yep. Oh, no.
Look at the Vermont Futures Project. They'll show you $140,000 of permit fees just to do any project in the state of Vermont. Like, how do we reduce that? How do we get that bill down? Right? Because you do have to hire a lighting engineer. You do have to
Nope.
hire a landscape.
No, and those are, like I said, those are not dramatic changes to our zoning. Those would be actually rather modest changes to
No,
the zoning that would
right.
have big impacts.
Right.
But I'm just cautious about getting out too far where we end up in a position where, the rules we have, a number of the rules that we have are important rules that make sure that.
Well, I'm just saying, we just say
Conditions
we're
are
going to
met.
review them.
Oh,
not
yeah, and
saying
that absolutely.
Not
is.
saying we're going to set policy for the zoning inside of the city plan. Just saying we should talk about all that.
Oh, yeah, and that's absolutely there, and it's absolutely in our work plan, so. So we'll add those, any of the comments, or anything that we miss, we can certainly add that in, and we'll remove or edit the continue to administer. Up with a good way of wording that. The next one, no surprise, go big with the growth center, include all of the residential 9,000. Many suggestions for this. So the one suggestion I had in the map, in the document, there's a map and it has the growth center split into 2 places. It has the area that already meets it and the other area that would, the smart growth area that would meet it if it had sidewalks. We can just make one map if we want to and just say that's the future designation map, which is basically Res 9.
Yeah, can we just go
Minus-
whatever the maximum allowable is?
Yeah, well, the only exception is the two neighborhoods that don't meet it are Toy Town on one side and Gallison Hill on the other. So other than those two Res 9 areas, all the rest of the areas would be put in.
We'd be looking at the tan.
We'd be adding the tan into that map. So that way, instead of having it differentiated into two colors, it would be the one color.
Sorry, and what do you mean what do you mean those two neighborhoods don't meet it?
We've had the state's already looked at those two, because you have to have a connection to the downtown. They've got to be contiguous,
Yeah.
and those areas are kind of cut off from the other areas. So we've tried to loop them in before, and they haven't been able to get looped in. So, and we've never tried with Gallison Hill, but we've tried with Toy Town, and they've.
Does that change? Does that take care? I know that the Zorzi comments about Saban pasture, does that take care of that issue, or are there still other parts of that?
He had a lot of comments, and we'll get to some of his later on.
Okay, all right.
But we'll switch that out, make that into one map. And related to that, while it's on my mind here, we also are putting, the thing we did not put on there was the proposed TIF district. So it may be on that map or a different map. It's technically not a designation, but we want to get the proposed TIF district also in that.
So the growth center would include the CCR plus Res 9000. And then an overlay of the TIF district, which would just be CCR.
One more time with that.
So the growth center would be CCR and all of Res 9000. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's an existing growth center.
Yeah.
And then
No, sorry, the proposed.
There's an existing growth center, and then there's the proposed growth center of Country Club Road and the proposed growth center of the rest of Res 9.
Yeah. And then
including those two.
And then for the TIF district, that being on the map, let's say a boundary around the Country Club Road property.
Four properties.
The four properties.
Yep.
For the TIF
So
district.
it's Saban's Pasture and Country Club Road.
I would advise
And the two
putting that in. I think that would be help with clarity.
Yep.
I just thought of this, but does somebody have the Google Doc open so we can, since Maria took the time to make some comments, I don't know if I forgot to bring my laptop with first, but.
I
have
do
the
have
PDF
it
open, but I don't
I've
have the-
been looking at her comments.
Oh, you can see them, Leah?
Yeah, so
Okay.
she doesn't have comments on every single one. She was here for that comment. She agrees with the planning. Yeah, I'll keep a better eye at. what
Thank
she said,
you.
And I'll call out and see that.
I appreciate that.
Add some new thoughts to our discussion.
Right.
Okay, so we had the next one, we had two strong comments on childcare, and I believe Gabe sent us a suggestion for, so we do have a number of childcare strategies, but they weren't organized right on that storyboard. For some reason, things got grabbed up wrong. So we're gonna reorganize that for clarity. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing was Gabe did send out some suggestions, which I can build into one. Basically, it was the strategy was to create a comprehensive action plan to expand childcare availability in Montpelier, collaborate with city officials, state agencies, and private landowners to identify, repurpose, and underutilized spaces for new childcare facilities, ensure the childcare is incorporated as a key feature in future city-sponsored development projects like Country Club Road, pursue grant opportunities to fund the training of new childcare providers and growth of existing childcare services.
That falls in line. Maria had a comment. Is there anything new to this? Anything new the city can do to encourage childcare centers? So I feel like what you listed does a good job. Addressing for comment.
Agreed.
So we'll just set that up as a planning exercise to go through and see what other opportunities exist. Maps need roads and names. Agreed. We will get that fixed. And Nick is actually working on that. He's also going to try to get things so they're scalable. So as you zoom in, more things will turn on. As you zoom out, more things turn off. So he's just got to get the timing right on that. What that basically is, if you're zooming in, if you get to a certain scale, the parcel lines will turn on. But if you had the parcel lines on when you're zoomed out, it would be just a mash of lines. So it turns off as you move out, and it'll turn on as you move in. And so that's what he's working on. He says it's pretty easy. I'm glad I've got somebody with such talent. Next one, recommend using underutilized state parking and conversion of offices for housing. We could add utilized state parking lots as a strategy, but I'm not sure our role other than to ask them to sell to developers. I mean, there's not a lot we can do with state stuff. Conversion of office space could be added to the housing marketing and outreach program. So that was my thought on that one. We do have a marketing and outreach program. We could try to market these ideas directly to people.
So I think there's room for us to, whether it's through our lobbyist. I mean, apparently the legislature is considering actually mandating BGS to come up with a plan. They have some plan. It's like this mystery plan about what's happening with all these buildings. And the legislature is considering it. Why shouldn't the city of Montpelier also be putting pressure on the state? I think it would be very reasonable for us to add that as a strategy somewhere. Not necessarily about parking lots, but just state properties and in the downtown altogether.
Yeah, if we can lobby about the appeals process, which we should, then I think we could probably lobby about unused parking lots
And buildings.
and buildings.
And buildings,
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, I'll add that. Maria's comment says perhaps a strategy could be request the state government sell or offload unused office space and parking lots. Just make it a public and active request to the state of Vermont, since that's really all the city.
Yeah,
Okay.
I like that.
So, yeah, we'll get a separate strategy for lobbyist, and then we'll build the second one, conversion of office space to the housing and marketing. It doesn't like the word of sponsoring. Somebody made a comment so when we do projects with Downstreet and things, we usually sponsor their community development application, and that's the word I've always used.
I think that's the technical word. Yeah.
And so they didn't like that word, but we can keep it as sponsoring. We can put it as host a new Downstreet project if it kind of sounds a little more.
Ariane, you would probably know, right? Isn't sponsor the right technical term?
I mean, yeah, I would think so. I don't work at CD, but yes. What? Okay, yeah. I think. I mean, it's sort of specific to the community development program, but I don't feel like it's an issue.
If
Yeah.
that's the case, if it's specific, I mean, if it is a known term, I think we should stay with it. Stick with it.
Okay. Like I said, I don't think it changes the policy or the impact in any way. It's just one specific mention of green space in association with the river corridor. We'll need to review various chapters to see if this was mentioned and or where it could be inserted. I do know later on we've got a recommendation that was emailed to you guys from John Cofans about the River's Edge master plan. And so that may kind of double bill, that might work to fulfill this request as well.
Yeah, I think resilience is a good spot for that too.
In historical, the comment was somebody was skeptical of
Yeah, sorry.
skeptical of making historic buildings resilient. And the challenge was, if we want to preserve our historic districts, we need to discuss how that would happen. Otherwise, our unique character would be lost.
I thought the comment was a little bit different, that Polly was making this is how I remember it anyway, but I could be totally wrong. That she was, I remembered her kind of making a note that the historic preservation chapter was a little bit in conflict with some of our other goals, but does anyone else remember that?
I'm gonna read my notes back to you and we're gonna see if
Oh,
it makes
good.
any sense. Historic resources regarding floodplains. It says buildings were built in floodplains back in the day. Nothing in the section talks about acknowledging challenges of interconnectedness of preserving historic places and floodplains.
Oh, okay.
That's what
So,
that was my recollection of that comment.
yeah.
Nothing talks about acknowledging the challenges of the interconnectedness of preserving historic places and floodplains. Maybe that's different than what this comment.
And it's not in. Guess I'll have to see. I could check to see if that's in synergies. I thought in synergies, we were pretty clear about the fact that that was one of the challenges of historic buildings were that they don't meet energy code and they don't meet flood codes. And that becomes an issue. We want to preserve these on the one hand, and on the other hand, they lead to challenges. So I thought that was kind of already addressed.
Well, I don't have I don't have a strong opinion about adding something here, but unless somebody else does.
There was a suggestion and written comments we got today that's related to this, which talked about, I don't know, maybe getting a planning grant. That wasn't the words that were used, but the idea of doing like a study to try to help property owners figure out how they might be able to make their buildings more resilient. Mike, do you remember? I don't know who sent that, but that was.
Yeah, John Copans had the downtown building flood resilience assessment. That was mostly targeted towards our urban core, but yeah. So.
Well, I'm fine not making a change with this and talking about John's comment later.
Yeah, I'm fine too. I'm also skeptical.
In economic development, making natural areas a part of economic development pillar, wetlands and wildlife. I thought most of that was captured, but I don't have specific changes to recommend.
Yeah, I think that, we talk about kind of ecotourism aspect of Montpelier. So I think that, I don't know if they just want the wet.
Yeah, I think wetlands and they wanted to add wetlands and
Wetlands and
wildlife.
wildlife.
Yeah, yeah.
Just more
They were talking
specific.
about bogs, marshes.
Yeah. to mention
Oh, yes, about
greenways and wetlands as economic drivers along with other outdoor tourism. So,
bird watching.
Yeah, which I'm fine with that.
Okay, I will add more
greenways and wetlands as economic. drivers.
greenways and wetlands as economic drivers. All right, appeals are a big problem for housing. Recommend the lobbyist. I don't think that's a bad idea to add, was my thought.
Concur.
Yeah, and I don't imagine that Montpelier would be only on the hook for this lobbyist. I imagine that you could probably recruit some other folks who would be interested.
Yeah, Maria also agrees. She says standing for filing appeals should be narrowed at the state level and the city should request this from the state. I am sure other cities would be willing to join Montpelier in the effort.
Yeah, I'll try to work with VLCT and see if that gets any traction. This should be bigger than us. It's been mentioned by the administration too.
Yeah, I think it's been in different drafts, right? It's just the appeals process.
Yeah,
but
I
it
don't
gets knocked
necessarily
out.
think the recommendations that are being made are good recommendations. I think there's
No, I mean in draft legislation,
Oh,
appeals
yeah.
process, but it just
I've been looking at
hasn't
the-
made it through committee.
yeah, just as I look at those bills though, the recommendations they don't go as far as I would.
Mhm.
recommend. You know, there's no requirement that somebody who lives on that 10 people on Terrace Street can appeal Country Club Road without proving any damage.
Yeah.
Generally, there's a requirement. If anyone else, if you're in a butter, you've got to show damages. But if you're 10 people who aren't in a butter, you don't have to show damages. And you're like, well, that just means any
That
10
doesn't-
people who
doesn't
want
make any sense.
to claw up the system can claw up the system. And they're like, well, we'll make it 20 people. And we're like, how about you not allow
No,
anybody
Just let's get rid
who
of it.
can't provide damages?
Right.
If you have
If you
no
don't-
damages,
You don't have a legal cause.
if you don't have damages, you can't appeal.
I did see somebody recommend a percentage of a town population.
Oh, yeah,
That you
that's-
go up to 20% or something.
That's
Make the
awesome.
hurdle a little higher.
So we will add that one in. The next one was a kind of a big, bold one put out there. Recommendation for a new strategy to have $20 million revolving loan fund for housing development. Bond big business to help the fund. I think it's interesting, definitely outside the box. If we add it, it may be ones that we study for the potential of, as opposed to recommending that we do it, because I don't think we can actually do such a thing in our current financial situation. I think we would have to have some planning that would go behind that. So we could study the idea or
Yeah, I like adding a strategy in the housing chapter about further study of public investment for housing development, including, specifically mentioning this. Because I do think, I support simplifying zoning and all the steps we're taking here, but I think, for housing to really happen, we need more public investment. And I'm not just talking about, affordable housing, but, TIF districts and for infrastructure and all that stuff. So I think it would be useful to acknowledge that somewhere in the housing chapter. We're not going to do it all by eliminating zoning barriers, in my view.
Just add it as a strategy, as something to study.
Yeah.
Consider
No, I think
research.
it just like reminds us, or to
Yeah.
me, it like reminds the city that like you need to keep seeking public investment opportunities or ideas.
all right, so we will add that one in. General comments on regional dispatch recommendations not taken, lack of vision for Country Club Road. So currently the council view and that of the police department, the dispatch department, is to maintain our current system of local dispatching and contracts with others. And as I said, we've agreed to put in the strategy of reviewing the studies that come out of the state. The state is looking to they've completed their study, but it hasn't been put into anything to operationalize it. So I think until the staff's opinion has been until council gives us new direction. That
City council.
yeah.
Where did the council? How are you speaking for the council in that comment?
And we're not taking comments and that's
I don't think that, I'll just address this very quickly. I don't think that Mike is speaking for the city council.
He's representing the council view in his comments. That's in the.
Okay,
council-
well, we can discuss this during the general business section because this is
Okay.
a working meeting.
I would say that we continue to defer to staff, which is the chief of police that we already received information from a month or two ago.
Agreed.
all right. So housing plan was weak. The resilience is better. Not many changes from 2010. Map's not useful. All about resiliency. 33 implementations. Many are continue. So resilience was barely in the 2010 plan, so I'm not sure why he would have made that comment. All of these are continued because they are ongoing efforts, and a lot of that's because of the work that the Montpelier Commission is doing. We're It's not to say we are resilient or that we're going to be resilient when these things are completed, but we have a lot of initiatives that are ongoing. And so we should reflect that.
So Mike, my comment on this one is, that it was an added chapter that we asked for coming out of the flood, right? It's not statutorily required. We asked for it. It's a starting place. I agree that there's a lot of things not addressed in there. When I brought it up, I was mostly thinking of the loss of foot traffic we have from state employees. That's my resilience issue, is how do we maintain a downtown with, a couple thousand less people coming into the city? And certainly flooding is, we need to pay attention to all that. I think we can work on that in future years. So I appreciate the comments that were given. I think there's a lot of other things that can be included, but I think we're fine. My view is that I'm very grateful that we got that chapter to acknowledge and just say we need to do some more work on it in the future.
Yeah.
Other
Yeah.
views.
No, yeah, because also in that same comment, it's like pass this to the city council so they can start the process to meet the growth center application and TIF. And then immediately amend it. So it's like, hey, like exactly what you were saying, hey, we can do better than this, but also don't let this derail you from just like getting on to the next step. So.
Yeah. And Peter gives a lot of great input. I'm not sure on his, I don't know if he wants you to use a thesaurus on, continuing or implement. But I'm fine using the same word or using the word continue on things. It's still describing an action, right? That was the goal, was to have, something that wasn't passive.
All right. So by and large, that's going to kind of stay for reflecting on Peter's comments, that's kind of staying where we're at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last comment we got was Public Arts Commission doesn't want to oversee culinary arts and festivals. And we'll need to discuss this also considering we have a recommendation to expand and reconvene the commission to include culture. So
Oh.
there's
See that.
a
Okay.
little bit of the rub that comes in on that one.
So what-
Well,
Oh,
I think that we got, as we were doing the arts and culture, we got public feedback saying, this is just, art on buildings. Why aren't we including, the performing arts, music, that type of thing? And we said, oh, well, I guess we could include that in our arts and culture stuff. But if the folks in charge of arts and culture in the city don't want to deal with that stuff, then I don't think we can force them to.
I want to add Maria's comment in here. She said, the Public Arts Commission was created to act as an advisory board, quote, in any matter pertaining to art. That the current commission sees its role limited to visual arts is informative and perhaps something that needs to be clarified in the city plan and by city council. So kind of what you're saying, like, oh, okay, like we were interpreting this as, as any matter pertaining to the art, but if the arts council is aware
Redirects
of that,
them.
then we need. Yeah. Yeah, we can't make them. Do that.
So what would be the thought? We do have,
so what's the specific, is there some specific language that says the Public Arts Commission is overseeing those, or is it just that we mention festivals and?
I mean, I don't know what Maria's quoting, but it says in any matter pertaining to art. So I don't know.
But I don't think that's something in the plan. That's something,
That's kind of like whatever organizational document,
yeah.
statute.
But it,
Oh, yeah, we don't have statutes in the city. We don't.
Yeah.
well, it would just been the direction they were given.
I mean, I guess
when they were formed.
my
the
feeling
charge.
is, yeah. Since this is kind of a bigger issue and they didn't suggest specific language, is maybe to just let someone in the Public Arts Commission know that we're punting this until the city count. I mean, I don't know. That doesn't seem like something we can resolve tonight.
I agree with that. And also I'm looking at this chapter in the plan right now, and it says, I'm just looking at events, like search for events. It says for the events relating to arts and culture, draw people from the region to visit Montpelier and patronize local businesses. That's true. And then towards the bottom, it talks about how a number of events and festivals hosted and sponsored by Montpelier Alive, Langdon Street Alive, and that the commission supports. That all of that stuff happens. So, and should continue to happen. So we wouldn't take that out. There's other entities besides the Arts Commission that does events. And I don't think we're explicitly saying that they are overseeing it all.
solely responsible, but we do have a strategy of reconvening the Public Arts Commission as the Arts and Culture Commission.
So they
Oh,
basically proposed to that. They don't like that
They-
strategy.
In the strategy.
They didn't
Oh.
directly comment on that, but probably they didn't know it was in there. They must have, they probably read the storyboard, and the storyboard had maybe somewhere in it under, who's involved, maybe it says Public Arts Commission does X, Y, and Z or something to that effect, and it included those pieces. So I'm not sure, but he was, Ward was pretty clear about his not wanting to be a part of that. But I mean, there's going to be a certain amount of rejiggering that may be going on that we're going to have to see in the next 6 months.
I
Year.
agree to let that go to city council.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and maybe we can we just send an email to the Arts Commission and say like, just FYI, we couldn't figure this out, so but we need to move the city plan forward. So, but you'll have an opportunity during the city council
All right.
process.
Sure. City Council can tell us to change it.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the questions that we have for them, they'll be able to think about and then like give
Yeah.
it to city council in a constructive.
And there's a potential, as I said, there's been some conversation. The city council wants to collapse some. We have like 23 or 24
right.
committees.
Yeah, I did
They want to
the
get
survey.
rid of some of them. So one thing that has come up is that you've got public art and you have Montpelier Alive, and there's some overlap in there. And where, does Public Art Commission become a subgroup of Montpelier Alive? But the public art is owned by the public, and Montpelier Alive is technically nonprofit. So we may need to keep it. And so there may be a greater discussion of how we work on the overlaps between those two and the goals of the plan. But for now, that's we'll leave it as is and move on. Additional comments to increase housing targets. I think we've gone through that pretty well. And growth center. Additional requests to streamline zoning, see above. I think we got that covered. Comments that city plan only minimally describes the need for owner occupied single family home production. My comment was statistically is the demographic she describes as a small percentage of households, which is why we have targeted rental housing. Households with 2 wage earners and a child, which is somewhat what she's talking about, is 7% of our housing. The last time I found the data, and 93% are not. Some families are living alone. Last time it was like 43% are people living alone. Another 15% are single parent families. Then there's a large group of non-family arrangements. And currently more than half our stock is single family detached housing. So the reason we always talk about the need for more apartments is simply because we've got a lot of housing that is, not that single people and couples can't own a home. I do, but that the preponderance of there's a lot of people, 43%, between 40 and 50% are people living by themselves. And so that means 40%, 43% of the people are, probably not shopping for owning a single family home, detached home.
Well, I think that we're not discouraging single family homes in any way. The developments that we are encouraging will include some. And obviously rental units or, you know, multi-family units have the potential to free up our existing stock of single-family homes, moving retirees, you know, into smaller, like the things that they can't do now, right? There's nowhere for them to go to downsize. So having, you know, potential for triplexes, smaller condo situations, apartments, senior living, all of these things could, you know, benefit people looking for single family homes in Montpelier.
Other than Country Club Road, we haven't prohibited single family homes. And Country Club Road is only because we own it, and that was the public recommendation. City council can choose to still allow it there, but that's just a general sense of
The
why.
entire zoning regulation is biased towards single family homes that are already.
Yeah.
get all the support they need, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've been clear that we need all kinds of housing. We need high-end housing. We need apartments. We need everything, right? We're
Yeah.
not discriminating in any way.
Yeah. Yeah.
They get plenty,
Yeah.
single family builders have plenty.
From somebody who's, yeah, getting
Um,
single family homes out there.
A recommendation to add the affordability chart. This could be an item to consider if we want to revise the housing storyboard. We can certainly add that current table in to kind of give a sense of what that is.
Yeah, I mean, but that's gonna change. So do we have a link to the resources and housingdata.org? I think that would be more useful.
We can add that.
What's the, what are the, what are the implications of an external link with
Oh,
changing?
That's not an issue because that's just a link.
Okay.
Now, if the link gets defunct, then there's nothing we can do. It'll just end up
Sit
staying
there
to be a
for-
dead link
Or
or
at least
yeah, and that's
for
the,
maximum 8 years. So
if anyone doesn't know, that's what the Housing Finance Agency,
uses.
they update all the data and that's very useful.
Are you suggesting that into an additional resources?
Yes,
section?
yes,
Yeah.
that's what I was suggesting. I think
I
that's,
think that makes
yeah.
sense instead of going back into the
Mhm.
story map.
So just so people are tracking, it's 7/12.
yes.
Yes.
We're on the home stretch.
This is
Last
the
page.
last page.
Recommended tax changes in housing chapter. See Vitz-Hume's edit, Sandy Vitz-Hume's edits, use more recent data than the census. These are mostly policy changes. These are some of the things I was talking about with reviewing with the CVRPC and what housing data could be added. Statutorily, we have no requirements. We're good from a statutory standpoint, but if people want, and I could see the value of having, you know, the data we had in there was based on the 2020 census. We certainly could go in and put in some charts and tables of where things are in 2025. But the affordability data is just, it's some of this data is harder than it has to be to get. And as Ariane points out, sometimes maybe a link to another data set would be the more appropriate.
Yeah, was she wanting things from the, like, the state level housing need assessment?
Yes, some of it was from the state housing needs assessment. Find her comments really quick or not. Don't want to get too hung up. There. So she went through and made edits that were in the document itself. So that should be something that could be considered. So she wanted to add a new bullet. So in the introduction, there's the bullets to ensure availability of a variety of housing types and options to truly address housing shortage. And 2, to take housing for all approach to extend to persons living in vulnerable situations and accommodate different life stages. She wanted a 3rd bullet to encourage home ownership as a way for everyone to build equity and wealth. The ability of Vermont renters to purchase a home if they wish dropped from 23% to 20 in 2021 to less than 6% in 2024. based on the Vermont Housing Needs Assessment. And then she goes into the planning context and recommends a couple other wording and language changes. Wants reference to the affordability.
I mean, I guess my thought is just if she's suggesting certain housing data, you said you review with CVRPC, that we could do that, but I'm not sure.
This is also something that maybe, we revisit next year in
Yeah.
year and a half.
Yeah, and this will actually come up. And maybe I'll jump ahead really quick for that. The last thing on your list, I've got a couple others that we emailed out earlier, was the housing committee list. And basically my comment was, this is just too much too late. It would take a big lift. It's a substantial amount of changes. Some of these things we're already doing. There's a lot of things that we are recommending that aren't in this list. So it would require a large 4 to 6 month process to.
I liked a lot
integrate
of the
those.
suggestions that are new. It's just we don't have time to digest it. Some of it it's gonna cost staff dollars and other things, like we just don't have time to look at it. But I think it can be whenever we decide to do our next review, like let's bring it right up, or let's have a joint meeting with them, however we do that. But
Yeah, as soon as I started looking at that, I was just thinking, where was this?
Met with them last year around
a
the
year
time,
ago.
like April, and said,
Yeah.
let's get some comments, and it just took them. We got this the day of your public hearing, so our public hearing. So
Well, I'm still grateful that they have gotten us
Yeah,
some
they
No,
did.
that's
good
Yeah.
comments, and
But
and
I
think
agree
it's
with
good.
that it's good. They're good
Yeah.
comments.
Yeah.
They're good comments, but
Right.
I agree with Gabe that,
Yeah, right.
that we need to implement them later.
I agree too.
And revisit.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of my thought with the Sandy's comment, and with this other one, is that this may be one where we recommend the council approve the plan, and then, we'll go through, do the zoning updates, and then this winter we can, while they're doing the public hearings, we can start working on the next revision, and maybe housing is the first one to work on based on the amount of comments that we have.
Yeah, I think we should totally, stress that when we're presenting that to city council, that this is such a all-encompassing document that we are going to need to keep working on it.
Focusing staff time on effort to existing utilities and needs, and not efforts on CCR. This is just a recommendation of people who wanted us to kind of stop working on the Country Club Road because the distraction of working on other things. And I think it's a policy decision, but I think DPW is good enough to be able to do both. And so that my recommendation is not to make changes.
Agreed.
Recommendation to expand the downtown, and this is actually reflected on the future land use map. So I think we actually already kind of met that one. The future land use map is bigger than our designated downtown, so.
Can I just ask, is there a new future land use map?
There is a new future land use map. I don't have it printed out here for you, but we will get it posted online. We have everything in unpublished format
Yeah,
right now, and we just have to kind of hit the publish button and
cool. I am eager to see it.
yeah, we did a revision, and then we gave you guys some of the revision at the other public hearing, and then since then, when a couple of comments people made about Murray Hill, we did some reviews and found there were a couple other things that we needed to adjust on it. So
Okay.
there is a revised version.
Great.
Comment on historic resources, suggestions. The chapter gives the impression we wish to preserve everything before 1970. Means we cannot replace housing. So combined with other comments, it sounded like the person would like less protection of historic resources and the district as a whole. I personally disagree, professionally say that our historic buildings make our downtown unique. The amount of protection we provide is a policy, for the commission and council to decide. We aren't looking to preserve everything, but it's a good place. But is there a good place or way to say that? So we do allow, and we have approved the demolition of buildings. And so it's not there, but at the same time, we aren't looking at having wholesale urban renewal and wiping out whole blocks of housing either, because that's not going to necessarily help us in the long run, in my opinion.
No, I think that there's things around historic preservation that we can definitely fiddle with. But I don't think anybody wants urban renewal.
But he didn't give any actual suggested language change, so I don't have anything to be able to specifically plug in.
Be great to put some double pane windows in there.
We have fixed that. We have gone through to fix the zoning and come to an agreement that says we can weatherize things and put in double pane windows, which under the old, and this also comes up a lot. People sometimes don't realize they're thinking the world is the way it was when they were working on permits in 2008. And, you know, in 2022, we completely rewrote the regulations for design review, and there've been just no issues. It's been so much easier. Sometimes people have an impression of what the rules are based on how things were. The Meadow Historic District is misleading. So we're going to go through and make a reference. The downtown is a national register. The Meadow and Granite Street are state registered. So we've clarified that in the legend. Third, historic city plan fails to address friction that design review caused on housing construction in Montpelier. Recommends eliminating design review overlay district. In the least, he wants to study of the cost of the regulations. Wondered if design regulations played a role in no one being interested in 1216. No, it was design review had nothing to do with 1216.
What's 12 to 16? What lot is
That's
that?
next to the drawing board, the
Okay.
vacant lot the
Oh.
city owns. The comments we got from developers were, I can go to any other community. If a community owned a piece of land on Main Street that they wanted to redevelop, they wouldn't be charging $400,000 for it. They would
Right,
be
like
giving
Barry
it away.
gave it
I
a couple
thought-
lots away for $1, right?
They would give it away for $1.
I thought that the council had come around on the $1.
They said, well, if they propose it, we might accept it. But the RFP says it's $400,000 and we would be open to whatever. But the comments we got back was, yeah, we're not going to pay for something that other places would give us away for free or for $1. But back to the bigger question, again, this goes back to that comment I was making. I think a lot of people have an impression of the design review rules based on what they were back in the day, you know, back in the, everybody here is old enough. If Kim were still here, he would know the Margot George days, where the design review rules were enforced with a certain vigor.
I mean, if somebody were to build a new building today, it's just facade stuff that they would get out that design review thing and they would just make sure the facade matched some of the suggestions that are in there.
Yeah.
Still build a modern building on the inside.
Yeah.
What's their, I don't think there's any.
Yeah, and you can even build a modern building on the outside too. Remember, the transit center was built,
Right.
went through
Yeah,
design
design
review,
review.
and that is definitely a modern design to a building. But it doesn't conflict with the character of the area, unlike the post office.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a
Post
big
office would not pass.
I'm not a big design review fan or design review district fan, but I don't think we need to change anything at this point.
Yeah.
Concerns that the green print plan conflicts with the future land use map, specifically with Sabins Pasture and Crestview. Concern is it prohibits 90% of that parcel. So the green print does not have any, it's just a plan, and it doesn't encumber any property. But there is a recommendation in those statements that comes from the green print plan that basically says, and they provided the language, basically says it's all willing buyer, willing seller. And that's
Oh,
all
what? I'm sorry.
willing buyer, willing seller.
Okay.
And so the green print just was looking at the principle in the parks section. We talk about wanting to have a park within a 5-minute walk of every neighborhood and a natural area within a 10-minute walk. And so those were the ideas that we're trying to get done. And what the green print was the first effort of going out and saying, okay, what would that look like? And so they did big blobs and said, somewhere in here, we have to have a park. That's not to say that all of Sabin's pasture would be a park, but somewhere in there, because Town Hill doesn't have a park. So how are they going to get access to recreation land and parkland? And so the idea was, and in the plan document, it says, this is all willing buyer, willing seller. We would work with the property owner to purchase. And if they're not interested, then it moves on. And the same with trails that connect these. So you should have trails that connect through them. Same idea. I'll point out my house has a 400-foot path that runs right over the top of my house. It's just a plan. It doesn't mean it's literally going to be a path going over my house. They just want to go and look, how would we connect the park that's on that side to the park on this side? Let's look at what that would entail, but it's got to go somewhere within this big wide corridor. But no, we're not purchasing 1,000-foot wide corridor.
Your comment is just to clarify that it doesn't.
We should add, he was correct. We should include a statement in there to make sure it's clear that that's what that map represents. And we did not do a good job of representing that. So I think we need to add that statement in, but I don't think we need to remove the green print or not use it. It is the actual plan of the Parks Commission, and it's a guiding document for them to talk about areas. They want to redo it. They want to do a better version of that because it was done in 2012, very coarse scale. And so they're like, maybe we could do a better job of narrowing this down. But again, the more narrow you make it, then the more specific you get to this person's property, as opposed to, well, if this is wide, it might cross 12 properties, in which case this person's not interested, but maybe that one is. And
We could use that word though in there just so the public knows this is coarse. I think that's a good distinction.
yeah, and if I had the language sitting right here, I'd read it out to you as to what. But he sent very specific language, and he's right. It's a good recommendation to have that language inserted. It should have probably been in there when the map went in the first place. So add language. All right. Running down the end here. Chapter 4 says we'll have 100 housing units, but they anticipate more than 200, 300 in the rural area. Oh, this is about Sabin's pasture. So we're going to update just the general numbers in there to 300 to 450 anticipated on the parcel. Not really splitting between the riverfront and the rural, just to go through and say this is specific to Sabin's pasture. There was a comment that said in Sabin's pasture, we anticipate 100 housing units. And at the time we were trying to be careful because we didn't want to put them in a position that would jeopardize them if they ended up doing a smaller project and having somebody at Act 250 go through and say, yeah, but the plan says you guys were doing more than that. And so we kept the number low, not trying to go and say that the property couldn't have that, but we didn't want somebody at Act 250 say, yeah, but in the city plan, it says they're going to put 450 housing units. So we think you should be in Act 250 because not that they would, but we were trying to be very careful of how we worded that. But they came out and said, we think we should have a higher number. And basically it's going to be exempt from Act 250 anyways, because of the new state laws. So
Okay.
we'll make that change.
Aren't they in the growth center there? So aren't they in the growth center?
Yeah.
So that should.
Yep, they'll be exempt from Act 250 anyway. So that means we can put the higher number in without having that worried. But at the time we wrote it, we weren't there. Oh, here's actually the language, the Greenfield language. In the spirit of volunteerism, voluntary land conservation actions will be determined by the landowner's willingness to participate in identified conservation initiatives. That's the language from the green print.
Yeah, sounds good.
Comments made in text in the archive does not always match with the document. So this is going to be a thing. It's just going to have to be a thing. We have maps. in the text says, see on the map on the right. And then when we make it into an archive, the map is below it. And
Yeah.
they're saying, but it's now wrong. And we're like, well, technically, we can't change it.
Right.
So
It is what
Sorry.
it is.
it is what it is, because it is the archive copy. It will be what it is. Add streets, water courts, residential structures, property boundaries. This is what I talked about earlier. We'll do this to appear at scale. So as you zoom in, it will add things in. As you zoom out, it will take things away. The housing committee list, this is up to you. I guess we've kind of decided that one. We're putting this on a list of things we're just going to tackle next year with the other one to add in. A member of the city council, and I think the city council as a whole, has said they want to do a housing needs assessment. So that's for the city. That's going to take 6 to 8 months. So if you add the 6 to 8 month housing needs assessment, which would be a great piece of information to plug into your city plan, and you add in the comments we get from the housing committee of new changes, new ideas they want to add in, and Sandy Vitsium's comments and a couple others, I think we're in a place where it's like, we adopt this plan, the recommendation, we adopt this plan. We come back next year to do a deep dive based on all the new information that we get.
Agreed.
Great.
Yeah.
Can I add one more comment on specific thing? I'm sorry, if this was addressed somewhere, but Thomas had also mentioned that at least he used the example in arts and culture in the storyboard for some of the like historic buildings. There's 2 lines of text in the storyboard, and then when you PDF it, it only shows those 2 lines of text in the PDF. Whereas online, you can kind of click to expand the text, but right now, when it's PDF'd, you can only see the first 2 lines. So getting the PDF version fixed to make sure that it encompasses all of the text. And I know that was like for arts and culture, but I don't know if that's the same for other chapters as well. So under use the map to explore some of Montpelier's most notable cultural and artistic attraction, Vermont Historical Society. Then it has 2 lines of text. And then when you click on it, it expands to more text. But in the PDF version, when you download it, it only shows that 2 line of
Text. Okay,
Yes.
got it. I will let him know that's true. That is correct. We shouldn't make sure that is all in there.
And for all the chapters too, because that was just caught on arts and culture.
All right. And I know we're up against the wall. I have to just check this real quick because
Am I able to bring up one additional thing?
Yep.
Or okay. Apologies for doing this, but I'm thinking about the math that we put forward earlier, and for housing, 75 units per year, 10 years is 750, 20 years is 1,500.
Yep.
Do we want to go in that direction? Do we want to revisit this?
Instead of 1,000.
So the numbers.
Well, if it's 75 per year, if that's our base, our goal, then that's 1,500 over the course of 20 years instead of 1,000.
I mean, I'm comfortable using 1,500, but yeah, the numbers that Gabe had thrown out.
Yeah, which is also
were variable, right?
right.
But if we just want one number,
I'm good with
75.
You're good with
1500.
okay.
1,500.
Other thoughts?
It's fine.
Okay.
So we're
I also think
7:30, this is when you sneak that.
well, it also is true that we in our current plan it says 1,000. That's what people have been reviewing, and we did hear 1,500, 2,000 plus at last meeting. So I think it's more reflective of that, and the math is correct.
All right. So the other ones I had on my list to make sure that we checked. One was Gabe's, so we got that. One is John Copan's.
Oh, right.
So he had 4, which we've kind of talked a little bit about. So he had the River Edge Master Plan, the Downtown Building Flood Resilience Assessments, the Watershed Collaboration Beyond Montpelier's Borders, and growing the culture of emergency preparedness. I thought that growing the culture was part of Maple, but I'm but the other ones, we can certainly go through and add them in. I mean, I thought we had some of these kind of reflected in there, but he's been doing a good job of reviewing it. The River Edge Master Plan is not in there, so we can add that in. But there's also a lot in there that's high priority. So a little bit of the concern I had for him was we just can't have everything high priority. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I mean, the River's Edge master plan is a great idea. Maybe we bump it down to a medium.
Yeah, I think the downtown building flood resilience assessment is probably a good high priority one. Watershed collaboration beyond Montpelier's borders.
My only concern with that, and I know we can't compel private ownership to do anything, but the language is a little compelling, so. Just if you kind of wordsmith, however, if you're gonna include that, like.
On the building this.
Yeah,
resilience
it'd be
collaborate.
great to work with building owners to say, hey, here's some things that you might want to think about, but. Look, this is like, we got some very expensive projects if we're trying to lift up all of the downtown historic districts. You know,
Yeah, you're saying like the provide building owners with an outline of resilience.
I think that one's okay.
It's not super coercive. It's not, then we'll require buildings to. Obviously, we need people to voluntarily improve their buildings.
provide the suggestions.
Yeah.
I just think, acknowledging that. We're not planning on introducing some kind of. New flood zone regulations that require a lot. So that's part when they're just recovering. If they're recovering.
Maybe watershed collaboration should be medium. Medium priority.
All right, so. Thank you very much. We got 7:37.
Okay, did you want to make a public comment? Because I feel like
Risk of.
You've been here the whole
I
time.
know you've been waiting, so
We have Alan and Doug are also online if there's, if you want to put a hand up.
You gotta come to the microphone though.
Yeah.
so everybody
Yeah.
can hear you.
And if Ariane hasn't dropped the gavel yet, then that'd be good.
James Moore, up off of Town Hill Road on Leapfrog Hollow. All wanted to say thank you, like sitting here the whole time and recognizing that most evenings you don't even have folks like me hanging out with you, but maybe you just have folks who are not thrilled with what you're doing. So thanks for doing this. I think you made some real progress tonight, improving the draft plan. I do have a question. These might be items for the plan or not. It's a question in terms of your process. Ariane, I think you mentioned, look, if we're going to up the number, that alone isn't going to do anything, right? There's actually got to be work to implement, and Tim made the comment, we've got to change a lot of things if we want a lot of things to change. I think there's more that can be put in from the suggestions into the implementation, which is part of the plan, which is what you and others will look to in terms of what you're doing in the future. I also think there are a few steps that you could take immediately that would be really helpful. And what better signal to send that we're serious about housing than, hey, if we see low hanging fruit, we're going to grab it and move it forward. We're not going to wait 6 months to do a process to figure out whether, one of those things that I would highlight is the fees to build and subdivide here in Montpelier. I'm doing the simplest subdivision possible, 2-lot subdivision. I've got $1,700 into it between state and municipal, and I'm not even through the subdivision process. And then you've got zoning, and you've got building, and you've got utility interconnection. So I think it was one of the recommendations from the housing committee. You also heard it from some of the public. I think putting something in the implementation saying we are going to look to reduce
Review
and
fees.
eliminate fees
Yeah.
would be a
I
big
agree with
step
that.
forward.
Review the fees, reduce it where possible.
I'm not sure if the appeals window is required to be 30 in statute.
Mhm.
It is. Yeah, I thought so. I was worried about that.
It's one of the reasons we pushed so many things to be administrative was that way we would get out of it.
Yeah.
But it hasn't affected the subdivision, but that's why we're gonna try to look at making some subdivisions administrative.
Yeah.
Because everything administrative has only a 15-day appeal period. So that's why we've made as many things as we can administrative.
Fantastic segue, excuse me. I think you all, whether it's probably not in the plan, but maybe it's just a separate memo to the city council suggesting the change. It's literally changing like 3 words in the zoning regs. We've talked about the subdivision process and what kicks into major site plan review. Right now, the zoning documents read that it's unless it is 1 or 2 units, it has to go into major site plan review. You could change that to unless it is more than
6 units.
6 units.
I think we
Or-
probably agree with that, but there is a process for zoning amendments, which
Yeah.
is longer than that's.
Longer than sending a memo.
It's
And
it's a public hearing. And
yeah, we're going, as soon as this city plan is done, our next
You dive in it.
goal is to go back to
to zoning.
the zone.
Great.
And you should come in for all those.
Yeah,
With all
I
your
can't wait.
friends. With all your
Yeah.
friends, because you know who's gonna come here also, all the people that don't want that.
I do. Yes. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you. General comments. John from the Peanut Gallery.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So I think we can add something in the fees about that section. And then we can do C and D on April 15th, right?
Yeah, just so everybody's knows, I looked at the calendars for when the next council meetings would be lining up. And so our next meeting is April 14th. So rather than approve everything and have people get a little bit upset about the fact that we approved it and you guys don't have the actual copy in front of you, we will make all the changes and have everything done for the 14th. And then at that point, as long as no changes are made at that meeting, we can simply approve that plan with the required report if there are any changes to it and forward those to city council because their meeting is May 14th. So we have to have a 30-day window. That's our 30-day window, but
Perfect. Good job, Mike.
so
I'm assuming no one online wanted to make comments.
they
didn't-
would have raised their
Okay,
hands.
they would have raised their
usually-
hands. Okay, we're just gonna.
So if they've got something, I'm sure they'll be in touch with me in the morning.
Okay,
Because of this meeting, are we now not meeting next week?
We don't meet next
We
week
don't.
because it's the first, we meet the second
Oh,
and
okay.
4th.
Just how it lines up with the month.
Yep.
Yes,
This just happened to be the 5th Monday, so we got one extra meeting.
gotta get it. Right.
Well, good job, Mike. That was a
So
lot of work.
we did it. Give
it.
us nice. And I'll try to be done because we're gonna want to proof it as much as we can because it'll go to council. So we'll try to be as get everything in, make all the changes that we can, and then get it back to you guys.
Awesome.
Great.
okay, does anyone want to move to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn a second.
All right, we got Tim and Sean.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.